First is Ellie Avishai, who's an MBA of the class of 2007, and she is the director of our I Think program, which is our initiative to bring integrative thinking content to K through 12 education. And I am fond of saying, and I believe that it's probably going to be true, that the single most important thing we end up doing as a school will be the I Think program, because it's going to transform a broad level of education. Next to Ellie is Dan Debow, LLB MBA 2000. So Dan is now an SVP at Salesforce.com, but he's more well-known in these parts as the co-founder and co-CEO of Rypple, social performance management platform on the web. That's a very successful company that Salesforce.com acquired, and he is a fantastic mentor to all sorts of young entrepreneurs here, because he's now had two successful high-tech startups that he's been a senior member of. Next is Johann Koss, the MBA 2004, more famous perhaps as one of the Winter Olympics most successful athletes of all time. He is now the president and CEO of Right to Play, an organization that he founded after the Olympics to support development through sport. Next to Johann is Odidi, who's the MBA 2007. He's the chairman and CEO and CSO of Intellipharmaceutics. He's a prolific inventor in the pharmaceutical industry and in pharmaceutical technology. Next to him is Mark Wiseman, LLB MBA 1996. Mark is the president and CEO of the CTP Investment Board, something that for all Canadians in the audience is of significance to you, because he invests your money to make sure that you have a secure retirement, and does a hell of a job. So these are our panelists for tonight. So I wanted to start off just asking you a little bit about your MBA education. You came to the school not knowing exactly what you're going to learn when you got here, probably with some expectations and thoughts. You learned something, you went off, and now you've had all of your wonderful careers. I'm just curious, are there things that surprised you that you learned that ended up being more valuable, more interesting than you thought? Are there things that you wish you would have learned during your MBA that you only figured out afterwards that would have been very important? Ellie, any thoughts on either of those, or anything else that your little heart is interested in?
Sure. Well, I mean, I like to say that I came to do my MBA sort of like going on exchange to a foreign country. So my background was completely different than a lot of my classmates. My background was in music and theater and education, and I came to get my MBA because I was tired of people not taking me seriously when I thought that I had some useful ideas about how we could transform education. What surprised me the most, I think, about being at Rotman was how wrong-headed so many of my ideas were when I came in. So I sort of came in thinking all left-wing people are really open-minded, and right-wing people will just kind of deal with them, and I'll kind of go through my MBA experience dealing with all the people and learning the important content and kind of ignoring everyone so that I can get my degree. And I realized that was just the most ridiculous thinking in the entire world, and my eyes were really opened about how I could challenge my assumptions about the way the world worked. And in every single class that I was in at Rotman, I was constantly being asked to challenge my assumptions about the way the world worked. And I think it really made for a very rich experience.
Dan, any thoughts on that?
So I guess the thing that surprised me the most is that I'd be sitting here 10 years later.
Yeah.
I didn't expect that. But seriously, I mean, I did not expect how lifelong the connection to the school would be, right? I mean, candidly, I was going to go to law school, and I thought, I can get an MBA in an extra year. Why don't I just tack that one on? It's like a swim badge or something like that. But you know what? It was totally transformative to be here. in a few ways. First, I'll embarrass you a little bit. I mean, Roger, I remember meeting you. You were dealing poker up at Manitou,
Right.
and I had no idea how transformative that poker play would be because you personally were involved both in WorkBrain and you were the first investor in Rypple and first on our board, and you stayed continually involved in my life, and I didn't expect that at all. And it wasn't just you. There's so many other faculty who I've been able to collaborate with and come back and speak, and all the students. So I had no idea that this would become a continued lifelong engagement. I'm excited to be part of the Venture Lab now, and it'll be something that will continue to be something to hang around. So no idea about that, and super excited about that. And then I think, in terms of the thing I wish I would have learned, probably punctuality and organization, my wife would say. But actually, I think the thing that I wish everyone would learn here is a little bit more adaptability, right? A little bit more flexibility. Like the world has moved even in the 10 years since graduating. It's so much faster. Things are changing so quickly, and I felt that there was too much of a Canadian linear thinking about this is the way the world's going to be, and this is what you need to learn. Get yourself on the consulting track, and I know things have changed a lot, and luckily it sort of worked out well. But I think that ability to be adaptive and to be entrepreneurial is another word for that. Was something that I really would have loved to see more focus on, and that's why I'm happy to be part of the Venture Lab because I think more of it's going to come.
Excellent. Johann.
Yeah, I had also a great introduction to Rotman, obviously coming here. And I'm from Norway originally, and I moved to Canada in 2000, and I managed to join the EMBA program in 2004. So I will start with what I would like to have more of, because as a speed skater, okay, and I know Canada, we all know what speed skating is, but it's a very simple sport, all right? You go straight forward, first left, and you keep doing that around the track. So the faculty came to me and said, wow, you were fast on ice. You'd be great on the hockey team. I'm hopeless because I can't turn to the right. So I might be saying that if you can have some more of this traditional ice hockey training, I would have
That would have been good. We'll work on that.
for sure. Mark will, he will definitely say that. He actually brought me on the ice. I had already learned by that time that I should not go on a hockey rink in Canada ever. Because he did that when I immediately arrived there, and he said, get off this ice. So, but what I will say, I'm running a non-profit, okay? And there is exceptionally, I really enjoyed by coming into the Rotman program was that my background is in sport and in medicine, and I came out of medical school and I came here, and I was running an organization, and I wanted to run it professionally as best as I could. And I realized at the stage we have been organization was about 4 years, and we had a growth rate of 120%, and I realized I had no clue what I was doing. And there is such a tremendous transformative understanding in the school, which I could use in a non-profit scenario. This is not only for a for-profit business setting. I mean, there's a lot of the things we learn, everything from the financial background, and it's great on the numbers in the classes, even to the element of forensic accounting, to understand how to be prudent, how to do strategy, how to do marketing, and all of these, and of course, all the HR elements, which we also learn about at the school. All of these elements is very equal in the business and in the non-for-profit sector. And for me, this was a tremendous experience which I could bring into my daily work. And having this, EMBA program, which is separate, obviously we just do it in the weekends, and everybody thinks we are like the students who are a little bit less serious or more serious, I don't know, but it's a fabulous program. It really brought business to my organization and helped me build it to where we are now, and we have more than tenfold that it's since that time, since 2004, in our operation and number of people, and we're working over 20 countries around the world and have a staff of 615,000 people associated with the reach of almost 1 million kids. By the end of this year, we'll have 1 million kids in our program every single week. So, and it would not have been happening for this. And the other thing which I've been, and it's Dan, and I mean, we have the same experience. I have a really close relationship to Rotman ever since I graduated, and it's a great life experience. And one program which was established is the Sonia Labatt Fellowship Program. Yeah. And I mean, literally, we have only 50 people in our office in Toronto.
So tell them what the program does.
The program is a stimulation for MBA graduates after 2 years to come into a non-for-profit experience. So take a newly graduate into the organizations like ourselves and work with the leadership team and learn how to run, help us. And we get tremendous talent coming into the non-for-profit. Over the last 3 years, I've had 10 graduates coming through this program through Right to Play. 7 are still within the organization, working in non-for-profit, and providing tremendous support to us. So this is like one of the things which I hope the school will continue doing, because leveraging these cross skills between the for-profit and non-for-profit is really critical. And we have some tremendous social service providers in the non-for-profit sector in Toronto and in Ontario. We are a global organization based here, but there are also some fantastic domestic organization and local organization, and we need the skill set. We need to motivate the young people. They need to get opportunities, and it helps the non-profit hiring these talented staff, because we can't afford it at the same price, and there where it comes in. The fellowship program.
And the fellowship program pays half their salary. So we don't want to do it to say pay it all, so it's a free good. They have to invest, but it's half and half.
Yeah. So this has been that's been a wonderful thing.
Oh, good.
A surprise to me, because we didn't have this when I was graduating, but it's been a fantastic support to our organization.
Yeah. Isa, what are your thoughts on the experience and what you might have wanted to learn that you didn't, and surprises?
Certainly. I think I was a unique student, as you would know, and most of the faculty members, in the sense that, not that I did too well or not too well, but in the sense that I came in 2000 to try and get the MBA program done. Then my dad passed away, obviously, just before the residency program, which was very important to do, to get the degree. I had to go and settle things at home, so I left. But I came back again. In 2004, I had to go away again, because I was then invited by the Nigerian government to come and write the Constitution, and I had to go.
Yes, yes. When your home country asked you to write your Constitution,
then
go.
I had to go.
They didn't do that with you, Johann. No Norwegian Constitution, no?
They have one.
Then I came back again in the EMBA 26. Then I had to run for president in Nigeria, isn't it?
Yes.
And I was told, Beatrice said, Isa, if you leave this time, I'm sorry you can't come back the fourth time. So we had to kind of draw a balance. I did go, but I came back and did the residency program, and I left.
After running for president?
So the question you just asked, what is it that I got from the program that I didn't expect? I typically get that kind of question in a different format, an easy format.
Yes.
Which is, you went back to Rotman 3 times. What were you looking for?
Yes.
You are running a company already. You seem to have made some money from BioVale. What is the big deal?
Yes.
Well, the big deal was, at a point in life after leaving BioVale, my wife and I, who sits in the audience, we are co-founders of the company. We were confused as to how to set up this business, what to do with this business. And you can see the confusion in the sense that the company wasn't going anywhere. We're inventing stuff. But that was just before 2007, for leaving Rotman. We're inventing stuff, but we're not going anywhere. So there was this issue of what to do. Experience in BioVale showed that a company that wants to invent things does have pressures from the analysts, from the markets, where it's getting money from, to kind of get things that can be done on a reliable, you can say, well, we can get this thing done. But when it comes to research, you just can't say that.
Right.
So these companies don't want to give you any money. And we knew that we would need to get money from those kind of companies. So what do we do? So many questions. So why Rotman? There are other schools. At the time we were thinking around 98, I think it's about the same time you were coming to this school.
Yep.
And when I was trying to select the school to go to, I was just checking around, and I read about you and your ideas. And I said, okay, I might want to come and take a look at this school. Because what I was looking for really wasn't the tools on how to run businesses or whatever. I was trying to look for what is the meaning of business, what is the meaning of management, what is the essence of this business, what is it? And the way you were putting your things and people at Rotman were putting things was more like from a psychology point of view. In fact, when I told someone I was coming to Rotman, he said, well, I think a shrink also teaches in Rotman. I think there was someone who was teaching, a psychologist, a psychiatrist who was teaching us in Rotman as well. So why you want to go to that kind of school? But I think from coming to this school, I learned, for example, cash is king, but in a different way. In the sense that I didn't like budgets. I was somebody who didn't like budgets. At Belleville, the CEO was always not happy with me. He said I didn't like budgets. And that's because budgets kind of constrain you. What I do, I can't really tell you how much I'm going to spend. But what I tend to tell you is, I have a goal, I can give you 2 products. I can tell you that I can ask the person, how much do you have to give to me? And I can work within what you can give to me. So everybody thought I was crazy. When I came to Rotman, I discovered I wasn't crazy. I was doing the right thing. And especially when you stepped in with the issue of integrated thinking, that things you don't have to choose between one or the other. You can actually look at both sides and pick something out that actually really works. And then I think the aha moment came in Jim Fisher's class when he taught value creation. He said, one thing he said, slide number 13, I remember very well. Slide number 13. It said, even in terms of strategic innovation, even clowns can innovate. You remember that slide, sir? Yes. He said, even clowns can innovate. I started trying to wonder, what is this? What does he mean by this? Clowns can innovate. But actually, he was talking about the great company from Montreal.
Yes, Cirque du Soleil.
Cirque du Soleil. So that set me going in terms of how do you do the value curve and what have you. Then, the final tipping point for us, and when I brought it home, my wife said, wow, this is it, was when I did a strategy canvas Professor David Beatty?
David Beatty?
In his class. I did a strategy canvas. And I'm still going to have to come back to him because I'm almost at the end of that canvas now. I need to come back and tell him what's the next step.
Yes.
On that canvas, I plotted out what Intellipharmaceutics will do and how it will do it. And it did help me a lot. I got an A in that subject, by the way. but actually using that strategy canvas, what I painted on it is exactly what we've done at Intelli. And we've done very well. As Rami says, cash is king. It doesn't mean that you need a lot of money to do what you have to do. It's how you manage the cash you have, the goals you set. Okay, it's trying to work with the organization in terms of the structure of the organization, in terms of the culture of the organization, in terms of the process of the organization. So those 3 things we want to put together and one learn out of Rotman. I think we're really very grateful for Rotman for what we did.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Mark, you were in the first JD MBA cohort, right?
We still called it LLB MBA back
Yes,
then.
LLB MBA, sorry.
We were still dreaming about our first building, let alone the second building. I actually started back on the corner of Bedford and Bloor in a building that we shared with social work at the time. So it was before Rotman was even Rotman.
Even Rotman was
simply the University of Toronto MBA program, and it was a very small program at the time. For me, actually listening to the previous panelists, I've actually come to the conclusion that not just because of the new building, but just generally, I should actually go back and do my MBA. And the one thing I would say, by and large, I'd come out of an undergraduate in the arts, in history and political science, and then I'd gone into law school and hadn't worked in going into my MBA, and so sort of came into the joint program that way. And I've now come to the realization that I actually took all the wrong courses. And I really should go back and take the right ones. Because at the time I thought, well, I should learn something about this whole business thing, and I should take, finance, and I should take accounting, and I should, learn all this really important numerical stuff. Now, this may worry you a little bit, what I'm about to say. But we have really good people, so don't let it worry you. But the numbers stuff actually isn't all that important compared to all the other skills. So when I think about my MBA and think about how much I focused on, with all due respect to Rami and to Professor Booth and all the others that tried in vain to teach me something about finance, the reality is what I should have been studying, I think, in many respects, was organizational design, managerial design, human resource psychology, the whole strategy and people management side of running a business. And I think that in many respects is something I didn't pay enough attention. You certainly took the required courses and then took more option strategy and more international finance and more accounting. And I think at the end of the day, if I think about the skills today that I need as a CEO to be successful in moving our business forward, it's really the skills that I've had to learn on the job because I didn't pay enough attention when I was doing my MBA around what would be described, I think, by some as the softer skills, but really, in many respects, I think they're the things that are most important. So, for me, I got a ton out of the experience, but I also think, in part, because I was reasonably young when I came to it, that I missed having that experience and maybe having a little bit of the wisdom to be able to find out the things that really are important about running a business. And Johann, as chair of your audit committee, that doesn't mean that the numbers aren't important. But certainly that's something I wish I would have done more of.
Yeah. So there's more method than madness to the selection of the panel. They're all super successful, but they represent 5 gigantic important sectors in the modern economy, right? So Ellie works in education, Dan works in the entire high-tech sector, Johann, non-profits, Isa, healthcare, and pensions and investment for Mark. So I'm curious, from your vantage points in kind of really important big sectors that matter a whole lot to the modern economy, make a huge difference to the modern economy, what thoughts would you have for business education? We always want to be at the front edge of business education. We are, as I often say, the only place I don't want to be is being called a traditional business school. That is the last thing I would ever want this school to be. I want this school to be changing, enhancing business management education. From your vantage point, what are some of the things that a school that is trying to teach managers in this modern economy should be doing that it isn't now, or doing more of, or doing differently? I know it's a little bit of an open-ended question, and I don't mind you being from your, sectorally, from your sectoral vantage point. What do you think the important things are that will make business education relevant, leading, robust, going forward, that we should be doing before everybody else does? Any thoughts?
Well, maybe I'll start just briefly, Roger, which is and this is, I want you to listen and take notes because we hire a lot of Rotman grads.
Yes.
And so we want them to be as good as they are. And some of our best young professionals are Rotman graduates. But I would say that today, as we look at our business, which is increasingly global, and that's the same every single person on this panel, we need, as a society in this country, to be successful, to be far more global and think in a far more worldly way than we do today. And we've got the raw ingredients here. We've got the raw ingredients here in Canada. We have the raw ingredients in particular here in Toronto. But we have to take those raw ingredients and use this business school to turn those individuals, those students, into truly global leaders. And let me give you a small example from CPPIB's perspective. So today we're about $166 billion in assets. Less than 40% of those assets are invested in Canada. And arguably, we are still way, way, way too overweight to the Canadian market, which represents about 3% of the global capital markets. And so if you want to think about where the growth for the Canada pension plan is going to be, it's going to be outside of this country. We have to diversify. We have to diversify to be responsible investors. We have to diversify by asset class. And we have to diversify geographically. In order to do that, we need investment professionals and young leaders who can understand how to do that. They need to be bicultural. They need to be worldly. They need to have studied, lived in another country. They need to speak at least one other language and hopefully multiple languages. They need to be, at the end of the day, culturally flexible to be successful in the modern world. And that's not just in finance. I think it's probably true of every business that's represented on the stage and probably every business that's going to be successful long-term in this country. So what we don't need is the 22-year-old male, because that's the traditional student, who went to York Mills Collegiate, studied at that other business school somewhere in the north part of the city, worked for a Canadian bank, and who thinks that the Far East is Oshawa. Right? That's not success today. Success today has to be something very, very different from what was traditionally measured as a successful student. And I think that's what Rotman is providing today. I think that's what Rotman has to continue to provide. And so long as it does it, we're going to keep hiring the best and brightest out of this place. And those people are going to help secure the retirement income of all of you in this room and 18 million other Canadians. And I think that's what's critical about this institution.
Wonderful.
I would like to just add on to what Mark is saying, sort of on the topic of diversity, and that is sort of to take it a little bit even further than global thinking and ask, how do you create diversity of thought, something my dear colleague and friend Numan Ashraf coins, diversity of thought, right? How do you teach people to be able to think beyond what they know and be interested and curious to think beyond what they know, and how do you know what you don't know, and all of that. And it speaks to me very, very highly to what we're trying to do now in public schools, because that's exactly what we're trying to do. We're looking at elementary school, secondary school students, and asking how are they now learning how to problem solve, and what do they need to be able to do in order to problem solve well. And what we find is that there's sort of two kinds of problem solving that happens frequently in the classroom. There's problem solving for problems that already have solutions, right? How many valence electrons does an oxygen molecule have, right? Or x plus 5 equals 12, solve for x, right? These are highly structured problems, and they only have one answer. And so in that context, problem solving is find the one right answer and hold on to it, because you're going to be tested on it later on, and you've got to recall that answer, right? That's one way of problem solving. Another way of problem solving, which often is put under the umbrella of more complex thinking, is evaluating and choosing, right? That is, if you were going to be running for election in Quebec today, would you run on a separatist platform or not, right? And so decide which side you think is more reasonable, and then defend it. And what we found is that neither of those ways of problem solving produce real diversity of thought. Neither of those forms of problem solving really help students create a new idea that went beyond what was posed to them in the first place. And so what we're trying to do is say, okay, how do you take a look at all the different kinds of solutions that you might find, some which might be totally out of your realm of experience, or maybe you just think they're absolutely ridiculous, right? In the business world, that would be there's no money for it, or, a dozen other reasons why it would be unconscionable, and actually take a look at what value those can bring, and how do you bring them together to create something new and different. And I think that as long as we can continue to train people to think like that, you're going to have innovators. Otherwise, right, innovation stagnates. And to add to that, I also think that it's not just about innovation in the context of the content that you're dealing with. It's also about your ability to be self-reflective about your own view of yourself in the world. And the more that business schools can ask their business students to be a little self-reflective about the ways in which they're limiting their own thinking, the more successful I think they're going to be. At least that was a big important thing for me.
Yeah, very helpful.
Yeah.
So it's interesting you picked sort of me as high tech, and it's funny the way we think about tech. And this is one interesting thing is like, technology is just another word for like new stuff, right? Like what we think of high tech today is high tech today, but in 20 years it will not be, right? So, the chair you're sitting on at some point was a really radical idea. The wheel was a big new technology, and so on, right? No one gets too excited about a radio anymore, but that changed the world at the time. That was the industry you went into. If you watch The Graduate, you want to get into plastics because that's the future.
Right, yeah.
Pencils, we don't think about plastics as like the future anymore. And so, your question to me is like the industry of technology is the industry of inventing new things and commercializing them and building them and then changing the world. And, I think that's an awesome thing for us to be teaching in business school and certainly in our country. And I think if you were to think about, or as I thought about your question, sort of two things that we could be bringing to students more of to think about that type of problem is confidence, learning how to be confident, and learning how to fail. And so the confidence part comes from you cannot change the world unless you believe you can change the world. Right? Johann did not wake up one day and say, there's no way I'm going to get 1 million kids to change their lives because they're going to get engaged in sport and that's going to transform their perception of themselves in the world. You believed it. And certainly you didn't win gold medals by believing you were going to fail, right? There's a certain mindset that you need to create, and you just look around the room at all the business success that's out there. And quite frankly, many times we don't teach people to simply believe in themselves enough that they can do it. I remember at a work brain meeting, sitting around a plastic table with pizza. And this was the business that I was lucky enough to be part of and wrote the business plan in the computer lab over there with one of my classmates and worked with a great U of T entrepreneur, David Ossip, to build up to $100 million in revenue, hundreds of employees. And one of the things we sat down saying is, as we did our competitive analysis, we did all the business school stuff, it was like, this is a crazy idea. There are a lot of competitors. There was a $500 million incumbent. And literally, we sat around, and I remember the conversation, which is like, well, screw it. We're smarter than these people. Why should we let the Americans go do this? We can do this, too. We can go be the best in the world. And I remember coming to talk to you about it. And you said, tell me about your business. And I think you said something like, okay, I'm glad you said you didn't want to be the best in Canada, because I'm really not interested in that. And that's totally right. We wanted to be the best in the world, and we had to believe that we could do that. And if we didn't have that belief, that foundational thing, didn't matter how good our technology was, didn't matter how good any of our skills were, we would not have succeeded. So confidence that you can do things, and you can believe in it. And I think there's lots of different ways to inculcate that into students. And then the second part, learning how to fail.
Failure.
Most successful entrepreneurs fail all the time, and the most successful athletes fail all the time. Michael Jordan has this great quote, I failed again and again and again and again, and that's why I won. And it's because only through failing at ideas do we learn things, right? Like, at least that's what I didn't sit down, you sit down to read a book and you understand it, but do you really understand it? When you try and build a product and then see how people use it and how frustrated and how big of a failure it is, you're like, I have to go back because you're confronted with reality, right? Not an academic thesis, but reality. And the problem is we think of failure as like a terrible thing. It's horrible. We should avoid it at all costs. In fact, arguably, going to get an MBA is like a risk mitigation strategy so you don't fail. But so maybe it's a bad population. But I would argue that like this is a foundational skill when you're confident that you will then try things, because it's only through trying things that these little serendipitous things occur. And it's also only through like not being afraid of fear that you don't channel MBA students into very traditional roles, very traditional tracks that are not going to go change the world. And I mean, maybe this shouldn't be an investment banker bashing. It's great. They're awesome. We need them. But we also need entrepreneurs who go do different things.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting to speak about failures. I've gone to a number of these classes and asked people what they want to do, how many want to be entrepreneurs, and some, it's good. The number keeps going up. Every time I come back, more people at this school say they want to do it. Yeah. But I always challenge them. They're like, well, what do you want to do? I want to work at a bank. Why do you want to do that? Well, it's a great, surefire way of making a lot of money. And I'm like, great, you should talk to my classmates who joined Lehman Brothers, right? And I, turned down an offer at BCG. You should talk to the class of BCG folks who got laid off. right? The idea that these conservative tracks are risk-free, that's a ticket to success, is just bollocks. It's not true.
Yeah.
But the idea that you can have confidence and you can access capital, you can learn how to market, you can build and create something new, at least to me, is probably one of the most important things, that we get people believing that they can do it and then learning along the way. I mean, that's how we'll create new businesses. That's how we'll change the world from the school. So those are my two ideas.
It's not the normal York Mill strategy.
Oh, too late now.
What Daniel's saying is actually one of the biggest threads in education right now, in character education, which is this word called grit.
Yeah.
Right, this ability to fail and get up and use failure as something that's useful. So researcher after researcher after researcher in the field of education again and again are coming out with evidence to show that that is the single most important factor in success, period.
Yeah, I mean, just personal quality, the last thing is like, at the beginning of Rypple, this business that we built that I think had a lot of, chutzpah or belief that we could go do something, which is a bunch of people in Toronto could invent this new product that would change the way companies like Facebook or LinkedIn manage their people. We failed for most of the first 2 years. I mean, literally. And Roger was in every board meeting, and it was only because we had support and people who understood that we were going to keep trying different things until we figured out what worked.
Yeah.
If we had a very traditional mindset, we would not have been able to generate the success we had. So,
Yeah, no, I think that's true.
I think I'm just going back to your question. I'm building on what you were saying. And I think actually we in the world have some tremendous challenges in front of us. Mm-hmm. Actually, there's no way we should look away from the global challenges we're looking at. If you're looking at the environment, the healthcare cost, poor education, the development world, all of these elements of change which we're going to see in the next 20, 30 years. And including that, obviously, the environment to run good businesses. So there are tremendous challenges. Probably bigger than we actually do believe they are. They are there. And the solutions are only in partnerships. It's between the non-profit, the for-profit, and governments, or if you're looking at in civil society, the service organizations, or everything from think tanks to other non-profit ways to the for-profit and the government. And I believe that learning how to deal with these partnerships is a key element of the business school, because you are expecting leaders to come out of here to lead in charge in all of the sectors, in all the different sectors. And if you don't have the ability to work in partnership with others and to kind of see the greater problem and solve those problems, I think we will have trouble. I think Rotman is in an incredible position to create that leadership training and to look at that possibilities. I think that's from the graduates you are recruiting, the talent you're getting in here, and throughout the faculty and the diversity we have in this city. So I think, this is that's actually extremely serious. I think that the Rotman can take a very big position globally in creating global solutions. And we should never be shy of that. And that I hope that it can be, and then, through our success in the research and building it on and great fundamentals, I think we could be a much greater voice than our neighbors in the south, which has a much more complex way of integrating with the world overall. And I think what we need we need Canadians to take greater responsibility for the global problems we have. And that's coming, obviously, from my perspective, being a global citizen, and looking at our global work. And I see this because we have established, and I'm from Norway, but I've established an organization based out of Toronto as a Canadian-based international organization, and Toronto-based. And the tremendous respect we have globally as a Canadian organization. It is fantastic, the reputation we have as Canadians, but we've forgotten about it, and we are dwindling this reputation. We're ruining ourselves by not continuing investing in this area. And that is, I think, as we see this both from the business sector, both from the public sector in a way of investing in global thinking. I'm building the same that Mark is saying, actually. We need to kind of create global solutions and bring that element with global experiences. And then I will say, thinking about this, I'm surprised. I've been here for 13 years now, living in Canada, in Toronto. And still people asking me, aren't you not moving home soon? Like, why are you living in Toronto? Like, this is not the place to live. So I think you need to improve your marketing classes, right? Because there is something about the marketing of Toronto, and not the Rotman. I think you're doing a fantastic job, actually, because Rotman, ever since I graduated, we just go higher and higher in the ranking. I love it. But we have I don't know what it is, but it's some way of not appreciating what we have in context of the world. And we should be much more proud of the city we are in, obviously the university we represent, but also the country and the things we're standing for and those sort of values. And we should market it better. So if you can kind of come up with a grid of a marketing class here to improve this, so we're all going out, every person out of Rotman, at least the leaders, new leaders, will market the better in the future than what we are currently doing.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, I think I'm going to move away a little bit from that subject. Just make it more specific to my industry, so to speak.
Yeah.
If you're trying to create jobs, you're trying to help people live a good quality of life, I think medicine would play a role there. In order to get the right kind of people to work in my kind of industry, or the right kind of people to be entrepreneurs, to build something like BioVille was built by Eugene Melnick, like we're trying to build this company that we have right now. You need people who can think. People who can observe, can take a look at something and reason, think, what's going on here? Why this? Something like that. But more importantly, I did make a statement that I saw a slide that said even clowns can innovate. But that's a very serious statement. What that tells me is if clowns can innovate, then innovation can spread everywhere. Then how can Canada be competitive? In fact, my industry is facing that today. Many of my colleagues, not many Rotman classmates, but people who were in the same business like myself, take Labofarm. Where is it today? Many companies have come and gone in Toronto, in Canada, but we are still standing. I think the reason why we're standing is because of what I call reduction to practice. And understanding somehow, how do you reduce this invention, this innovation to practice, make it really work? And how do you continuously do this? Most of the people we hire today don't have these skills. They may be great in inventing something, but they don't just have the skill to make this become a product, something that somebody wants to buy, something that can help someone. So we certainly do need, and I think you are heading in the right direction. You have a design department or something like that.
Yeah.
And I think that's what we need to teach, design, not just for scientists, but even for accountants, even for people who are marketing people, for lawyers.
Even for lawyers? No, it's just no. So maybe this may be the dreaded. You've got to hammer everything looks like a nail. But I mean, to me, there's this incredible through line to all these thoughts. At least to me, we do have to continue to work on teaching people to be these reflective, kind of creative thinkers, right? It seems all of the things that why would you think failure is a good idea? Only if you can reflect on it intelligently rather than be totally kind of reactive to it. How can you be a good partner and have partnerships? It's by understanding other people's models and coming up with better ones together. How can you be usefully global? I think probably the people, Mark, who aren't kind of global thinkers enough for your liking say, oh, that culture, I don't understand it, and so I'm just going to ignore it and think of my own and who can bring things really to life, like it's the theory of what we're trying to do versus the practical things that actually happen when you do it. Just be able to think your way through it. So it strikes me that it feels to me as though business education has headed in a direction of tool propagation and teaching. You're going to teach a whole bunch of tools. You come in with an empty red toolbox. I think of sort of a kind of classic red toolbox, and you come in one class and get a wrench, in one class and get a hammer, in one class to get a screwdriver, and that does not make you a fantastic carpenter, a fantastic a fantastic worker, what helps you is being able to figure out, how to combine a hammer and a screwdriver to accomplish a task, and how to invent new tools and ways of thinking. But it did strike me, and maybe I'm thinking too much from our own perspective, but that the things that you all see reinforce in me this need to really get people to be able to be better, more creative thinkers, and to not just stick with the easiest thing to do. Like we could say we've solved Mark's problem because 14 years ago we had 10 international students per year in our full-time MBA program. We now have 120. It's almost a 50-50 split. So just having domestic and international students together will make the domestic students more international and will bring international perspective here. It could or it could not, right? If they don't learn how to go beyond the thinking patterns that you described as the limiting ones, they won't. They'll just hang out together in their own groups and not learn from one another and learn how to think. And so I think I think keeping on pushing that sounds like the right thing to do. Maybe I'm just thinking about what we're doing already, but
I think you're right, but I think it's also integrative thinking and integrative behaviors.
Yes.
Right? It's great to think.
Yes.
You've got to go do stuff. And I love the line that Bruce Kura had about how this building is now open to the rest of the school. You think about the connection between, business students have to go talk to education students, to go take classes there, understand how they think about the world in a very different way, right? Biotech students, we've got incredible chemistry and computer science and engineering. These people have to get out of the building. They have to go walk around and experience the world.
Yeah.
And go confront people who are not looking at the same way. You can't just think about it. You have to actually engage. And I think there's something integrated behaviors.
Yeah, and maybe that's the vector. Maybe that's the vector to go on, is to say, are we making sure that we're getting them those experiences? And I tell you, we did the new version of the Integrative Thinking Practicum this year that the wonderful Jennifer Riel and I taught, Marcel mentioned, and I think most people would say the most important thing was when Bill Down gave them an integrative challenge, and at the start of the course, and they actually had to go figure something out and go. The best 4 teams had to go and present to Bill Down, 68th floor, Bank of Montreal. That gives you a real feeling for doing. And if you come up with a kind of a dumb idea, it's fairly, embarrassing. It's painful. And so with the venture lab that you're a part of, with DesignWorks, maybe those are all things that we've got to make sure we're pushing even more of, so that we get people getting kind of, if you will, repetition, because it's all about reps. Johann would know it's all about reps around that rink, and how many reps can we give them in integrative behavior before we set them off on their course. Maybe that's the solution.
One area though is, I'm pleased to have the opportunity to sit next to this gentleman, and I hope he's going to be giving money to my company. but having said that, it makes me think of something. One of the difficulties a company like mine faces, and any entrepreneur faces, is the issue of money to get things done. Mm-hmm. And that makes me think that there should be a different way to teach people who come through this program, who become, analysts or work in the banks or be in a position to give money to companies like my company. Yeah. The way they look at the criteria they use, they want a company that can come and say, you know what, if you give me $20, I can give you $22 back in 2 years' time. Yeah. Things don't work that way. That's not the way great companies are created.
Yes.
They must have a different kind of mindset. They should be able to put money. He should be able to put money in my company, even though my company cannot tell you what's going to happen tomorrow. It's just going to try and do its best.
Yes.
So how do you get this organized on a student level and get people to know this?
Yes.
Well, I think it goes back to one of the point that was raised at the beginning, which is this diversity of thought.
Yes.
And I think inspiring and nurturing diversity of thought and diversity of opinion is something that business schools, quite frankly, have not traditionally done a good job at. And if you do that, the rest starts to follow. Being global follows, being an integrative thinker follows, and so on and so forth. And I had, as a law MBA student, I had an interesting experience because when I came to the business school from the law school, I thought, boy, this business school class is really diverse. And if you looked at a picture of the class, it looked way more diverse at the time than the law school looked by the faces in the picture. But the reality was, at that time, and it's changed a lot, but the reality at that time was there was great diversity of thought in the law school, and there was almost no diversity of thought in the business school. So to think that diversity is just about the color of somebody's skin or their gender or where they grew up is only one part of the puzzle. Yes. And inculcating diversity of thought is what allows us to be creative and to integrate and to bring those different ideas together and to end up with a solution where 1 + 1 equals something more than 2. Yeah. And that's what Dan's done in his business. That's what you're talking about. That's what each of the examples on the stage have done by looking at a problem and coming up with an absolutely new way of actually the problem. Not a new solution, actually coming up by reshaping and restating the problem and then answering that new problem. Yeah. So I think that to me, what I pull out of this conversation is that one of those building blocks you need is that diversity of thought in the classroom and in the building and how you get that on the campus. And again, Canada, Toronto, the University of Toronto, the raw material, we're blessed to have the raw material. Yeah. So it's just taking, if we can figure out the right recipe, the ingredients are all here.
Wonderful. I like that as a way to close the panel. Ellie, Dan, Johann, Isa, Mark, you honor the Rotman School by succeeding in the ways you are in such important ways that are changing the world. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being this panel. Thank you.